Notes on style. Slave play is a comedy of sorts. It should be played as such. I'm not sure where the music is coming from, but it's there. You should not work to make the audience comfortable with what they are witnessing at all.
So if you're here and expecting comfort, you may not have it. I will not give it to you.
The events of the play are happening in real time. There shouldn't be so much scene transitions. The action of the play should just fall into the next moment. A double slash in the text delineates a dynamic shift in present location to a new location on the plantation. Southern accents should be used deeply and broadly until they are not. You will know when. Perhaps the spaces on the McGregor plantation are literalized with deep verisimilitude. This is preferred in some ways. But if they are not, they should be presented with the bareness of a black box. An aesthetic that will telegraph to an audience, if only they had more money, but they are doing what they can. This is a play about shades, colors as much as it's about race. Color play, shade play should be of interest to those casting this piece. What does it mean if Gary isn't blue-black, in the words of Toni Morrison, but just black-black? Does it change his relationship to the space? Everything in life is a performance. I've chosen to present a performance of antebellum life that is in conversation with the ways in which that time has been presented to and informed the world's collective imagination of life in American South during slavery. Act 1. Work.
Work, 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 work. To me, I be work, work.
Good evening, beautiful people. I hope you can all hear me. My name is Jody Patterson, and I am an LGBTQAI+ advocate. I'm also an author, and I'm a native to New York City, the heart and home of theater. I'm also chair of the Human Rights Campaign Foundation Board, an organization that is fighting every day for the life and the support and the equality of my Black, queer, transgender family. I can remember sitting in the public theater in the 90s when I graduated from Spelman College, watching Huey P. Newton and the Black Panther Party literally come to life on the stage and coax the revolutionary out of me. Theater can do that. To be here tonight with other creative revolutionaries is an honor. I am thrilled to be moderating what I hope will be an invocation of Blackness, of queerness, and of sexuality in all of its complexities and its beauty. What an opportunity we have tonight to be uninterrupted and in conversation around the entanglements of sexuality and race. Of course, we'll look at everything through the lens of theater because many of us live and breathe in that world. But I also hope we have time to look at it through politics, although sometimes that might get too heavy. Tonight, I think we should spend some time on how race and sexuality affect politics, but also how race and sexuality affect our private moments at home. I have with me a stellar panel of people I both admire and aspire to be somewhat like. Jeremy O. Harris, first and foremost, is the playwright and creator of the most Tony-nominated Broadway play ever, Slave Play. He was named the queer Black savior the theater world needs by Out Magazine. Jeremy O. Harris. Next, we have Shalia Latour, a 2020 Tony nominee for her work in the critically acclaimed Broadway production of Slave Play, and a recipient of the Antonio Award for Best Featured Actor in a Broadway Play. Shalia. C.A. Johnson is a Brooklyn-based playwright and has an active career in both film and television. Her celebrated play, All the Natalie Portmans, received its premiere off-Broadway. C.A., welcome. Atu Blankson Wood is an actor, theater maker, and educator. He has a Tony nomination for his outstanding role in Slave Play. Welcome, Atu. And last but definitely not least, my partner in crime, Alfonso David, is an accomplished and nationally recognized LGBTQ civil rights lawyer and activist. He is the president of the Human Rights Campaign, our largest LGBT organization globally. Welcome. Okay, so I think we have about 1,600 people in the audience.
Wow.
Robust. Just relax. Don't get nervous. But tonight, you know, I want to talk about art. And for many of us, including myself, art provides a voice of the unheard for millions of people, for small moments that might never go represented. And let's be clear, to be an artist, you don't have to write a play. You don't have to dance. You don't have to sculpt, right? It's about a way of living. You have to pay attention, you have to remember, and then you have to participate in life. That's how I'm defining artist. So I'd like to kick off the conversation with Alfonso David, who works every day for equality. He may not be an artist on stage, but I consider you an artist. Alfonso, thank you so much for hosting this event. As president of HRC, you're making a concerted effort to ensure the organization is not only doing work for communities of color, as you advocate for LGBTQ rights and equality, but you're very interested in impacting the culture. I hear you talk about this every day. A little over a year ago, you honored Jeremy O. Harris and another playwright of color, Matthew Lopez, who wrote The Inheritance. Why is it important for you to celebrate artists while you're advancing LGBTQ human rights? Set the stage.
Oh, first, Jody, thank you for that question and for facilitating. And I want to say welcome to my fellow panelists. For me, artists are dream makers, right? They create the narratives by which we come to understand our world, and they also provide the roadmaps for how we operate within it. And in that sense, I believe that artists operate at a more fundamental level in some ways than even the law. So they operate in a space of imagination, which I believe is the source for inspiration for all of our actions. In fact, it is often the case that artists lead culture change efforts that result in changes to our laws. We don't have to think too far back to marriage equality. Just think about how relatively quickly the political and the cultural zeitgeist in this country changed on marriage equality. I believe that that fight was largely fueled by artists. Artists, for me, are vital. They fuel our imaginations, our creativity. They push us to see the harsh truths clearly, to Jeremy's point, to think outside of the box, to do more than imagine the current environment that we live in, but really contemplate a better world. And they do it through creating representation that in some instances don't exist. They inspire us to really create a better paradigm, whether through music or film or dance or literature or even social media. So for me, it is important that as the president of the largest LGBTQ civil rights organization in the country, to make huge strides towards the intended goal of intersectional liberation. And that's what I'm fighting for, right? And the conversations about artists and art are really necessary to achieve any sense of liberation and to realize liberation in its full form.
Alfonso, I know that you sat and watched Slave Play twice, and you're trying to come back for a third time. I know your schedule was crazy, but how did you take that actual body of work and bring it to your work at HRC?
Well, first I found Jeremy and I just said, thank you for doing this. Watching Slave Play the first time was such an incredible transformational experience. It was as if I was having an out-of-body experience when I watched it, because it forced you to challenge your perceptions of yourself, your perceptions of sex and sexuality, and then it made you go through this psychoanalysis of yourself through a well-structured character study. And what I think Slave Play did for me and what it could do for other people is to really challenge our perceptions of identity, which is what I am hoping to do with my work, what I'm hoping to do with the Human Rights Campaign. How do we see ourselves? How do we see beyond ourselves? How do we break through the paradigms that shift our perception so that we can actually fully realize our democracy? We live in a democracy where Black people, brown people, LGBTQ people, Asian people have been oppressed through a system that has been created to oppress us. So how do we break that paradigm, and how do we create a new way forward? And I just think what Jeremy did with this play and all the actors in bringing it to life was so incredibly transformational for me. And I see it manifest in my day-to-day work every day.
It's incredible how you talk about challenging and transformation and pushing us forward. Jeremy, I want to go directly to you because this night is a celebration of you, of the work you've created with Slave Play, the most nominated, Tony nominated play ever in the history of the Tonys. I believe 12, if I'm correct, 12 nominations. Congratulations on that. And you didn't stop there. And I think this is what we're talking about, pushing it. You and the Slave Play team have started an initiative called the Golden Collection, which is an initiative to bring Black playwrights and their works to every state in libraries. I want to talk about, before we get to Slave Play, I want to talk about that collection because I think it might be the impetus to your creation or your creativity. Talk to me about some of those works that we're bringing in through the Golden Collection.
Well, first of all, thank you all so much for having me and everyone else here. And I just want to give a shout out to CA, who was the first person to ever read one of my plays and put it in a reading series in New York City. So thank you, CA. But also I want to say that just to clarify for the audience that I don't see any of the successes of Slave Play as like a Jeremy O'Hara success. I see it as a success from a community of people. And that community started at YSD. And also that community was like, you know, built up and around by the people that some of whom are on this call right now, many of whom are not, who put their blood, sweat, and tears behind a really difficult, complicated piece of theater and saw it all the way through the impossible of us going to Broadway. So I just want to give like a little clap right now for all these people. You know, Atu read the play when we were on our way to Reese Beach. In James Was Not Even Warrior's car. Like, he read a monologue from the play there. Shalia, I slept on her couch when I visited Yale, and then she was one of the first people to ever be in a reading of the play when it was just 1.5 acts. So I don't know. I don't know that I could have finished this play without any of those people. So I just wanted to start.
This is a real family.
Yes, it's a true family endeavor. And I feel very blessed that I got to do something in the theater world in 2018, 2019, that felt more like I was doing it in 1918, 1920. So thank you guys. But yeah, to the 1920s and beyond, so much of my formulation as a theater artist came from not seeing theater, but reading it. And also reading reviews of theater. Because when I couldn't get a play in my local library, and I'd have to do the next best thing, which was read the New York Times review of it, or read the Village Voice review of it. Whatever I could find online about this play that perhaps someone in Bomb magazine said inspired them to write the play that I had just read, that I had bought at Barnes & Noble in Greensboro, North Carolina. And so when we were thinking about this year and what it meant that Broadway had closed down, that any producer who had a show running at the time could think about were the Tonys, and the fact that no one knew when those were going to happen. When that was all going on, I started having conversations with Greg Noble and Carly and the rest of the producers about what to do with this chunk of money that people usually stow away for awards campaigns. And for me, in the sort of wake of, you know, all of the things that were happening with our country vis-a-vis coronavirus, but also in relationship to George Floyd and the various conversations that were reigniting in our country about race, racism, and all of these different entanglements, it started to feel really icky that, like, you know, people needed resources and I had access to resources, and those resources weren't going anywhere near towards the people that that needed them the most. So I started thinking like how gross it was that we have these resources from a play about systemic racism if we're not going to actually engage outside of the four walls of the Golden Theater. So I talked to them and they heard it and were so excited about it, and we're like, yes, let's do something with some of this money. So we took like, I don't want to say the wrong number, but we took a large chunk of it.
Money, yeah.
A large chunk of money, and we gave that to various funds that were helping with helping protesters get out of jail, and also helping the people in Minnesota specifically.
So unrelated to theater, but related to the political context.
Yes,
okay.
yes. Yeah. Because for me, again, I talk about this all the time, but like the reason I do theater is because theater is the first political forum, right? Like, especially in the West, but even in both Eastern theatrical practices and early African theatrical practices, the theater was where people would play out scenarios, ideas about society in order to create societal change, right? And I think in the commodification of the industry, we've forgotten that. In the sort of Wicked the musical, Rent the musicals of it all, we forgot that these are supposed to be about affecting a catharsis to make people do something differently in their lived lives, in their real communities. So then after we did that, I started talking to them more about this rest of this money. And I believe it was Carly, because I had mentioned the idea of doing some book giveaway of all the plays that had really inspired me. And Carly was like, why don't we do it around the entire country? And I was like, oh, we can do that? We're
talking thousands of books here.
Yes. I mean, I genuinely thought that like it would be impossible to send, all like so many of the formative texts for me to like all 50 states plus Puerto Rico and Guam and, all of it. In DC, right? Like I was like, that doesn't make sense.
Name 5 of those formative.
So Le Blanc by Lorraine Hansberry, like a really, really important play to me. And I picked Le Blanc because everyone's read Raisin. That's the most read play in the American canon, which is amazing because a Black woman wrote the most read play in the American canon. But no one knows about Sidney Bernstein's Window or Le Blanc. And Le Blanc was her unfinished play. Then there is God Is by Alicia Harris, a playwright who was working in LA while I was working in LA and was one of the first playwrights who was my age that I was reading and saying, like, you feel like a sibling to me. Not to mention we have the same last name, which is funny. Booty Candy by Robert O'Hara, who directed my play on Broadway. And his work as a Black queer man spoke so deeply to my work that I couldn't imagine doing something like this without it. And then Alice Childress's Wedding Band in Trouble in Mind, who was supposed to be the first Black woman to have a play on Broadway, but she refused to change the title of her play so they wouldn't take it. And now it's going to Broadway almost 70 years later with Roundabout Theater.
Pieces that not everyone knows about. These are some of the hidden gems.
These are deep cut Black plays with, a mix of someone like Adrienne Kennedy, 89-year-old idol of mine, who is one of the most taught playwrights and least produced playwrights in America.
So I'm curious. I have 1,000,001 questions I want to get back to you on, but this idea that some great plays go unknown, and then this great play, soars to the heights. That's something I want to talk to you about. But I want to skip over to C.A. Johnson for a moment, because when you said she was the first one who read the play, I thought, okay, so I need to investigate that. C.A. Johnson. So before we get to slave play, what interests me about your work is that you focus on women. And you are intrigued by women. I'm a woman. I am a mother of 5 children. I'm an ex-wife twice. I'm a current lover to a man. The amount of energy that this woman puts out is no small feat, I think, to quote your words, right? About a decade ago, my own child at the time said, "Mama, I'm not a girl, I'm a boy." Penelope was 3 at the time. And I really had to stop and listen. And since then, I've been really tuned into the opinion of children. And there was something you said that, and I'm going to quote you actually. "My voice as a writer is closest to my child self. The things that I'm often working through in my art are the things I've been since I was 5. Talk to me about that. Talk to me about the child perspective in these tough topics of gender, identity, race, sexuality. How do you bring that forth in your work today?
Yeah, I feel like for me, something I'm learning, I mean, the thing is, I mean, I know you're with me on this, Jeremy. It's like we're making this stuff and we're doing this stuff and it's all exciting, but I still feel like a baby. I still feel like I'm figuring out so much about my voice. And what I'm learning is, as much as I think I'm writing about people, I'm writing about bodies. You know what I mean? You're putting bodies on stage. You're asking a group of actors and a director to make emotions physical, to like present their bodies to a room full of strange bodies. Like everything that we're doing is so deeply physical and so deeply felt. Even when I'm writing it on the page, I have to stop and think, if an actor says this, where would they breathe? You know, when would they breathe too long because they got to get to the next line, and then getting to the next line might break them, right? Like you're not actually, yeah, sure, you're writing action. You're writing things that people can play, but you're very much writing physical moments. And I think what I've learned is like, when I really look back at a play, especially when I'm trying to figure out what's wrong with it, that's really, I think, when I learn what my plays are about, because I'm like, that's not working. And it means I'm not admitting something or saying something, or I don't know how to articulate it yet. That's when I go, oh, it's not about this. It's about that time when I was 5 and my brother pushed me and my aunt told me, hit him back or I'll hit you. And I had to figure out what that meant inside of me, because I'm like, hit my baby brother? And she's like, he's a boy. You're a girl. You have to show him that you're going to see. The child can't imagine that. But I'm also being given a script for how my body and my power is going to be perceived from this moment forward. And I am being told, you are a child, but be a woman now. Be a woman and make a choice for your womanhood, which is truly absurd, right? But, you know, as a Black girl growing up in suburban New Orleans, people say crazy stuff to me all the time. That being said, those little moments stick with you. Like, one, because they're formative. Two, because whether they came out of love or not, they're little bitty nicks, right? They're like the small pieces of trauma that form who we are, and we heal them and we keep moving, but they form who we are. And I think when you're writing any moment, that moment is attached to 12 other moments. And I would be lying if I said that any play I wrote wasn't about who I was when I was 6. All the Natalie Portmans, which went up this past season, we had a really tough moment in that play where we were trying to figure out what was wrong with my lead. I'm always writing Black women who, which is actually something that you did really well in Slave Play, Jeremy, that I've talked about a lot to a lot of other people. I'm writing Black women who, if you were to read them from the outside, they're getting it done. You know what I mean? Like, they are survivors, they are resilient, they are strong. And then there's a moment in a play where somebody goes, do something, or they go, why would you do that? And they're like, I don't know. And I'm deeply invested in that moment, because we need Black women to have answers. We want them to have answers. We want every Black woman to be Stacey Abrams. Right? Like, Stacey Abrams me, please save me. And it's just like, when is the moment when somebody says, save yourself? And have we actually been given the tools to do that? Some of us have and some of us haven't. And I'm like, okay, so that's the moment I'm trying to dramatize in a play. But we're trying to do this with this character, right? We're like trying to dig into this moment. And somebody said, well, what is she dealing with? What is the problem here? And I was like, I think she just wants to be positive that her mother loves her. And they were like, that's a deep cut, CA. And I was like, I'm going to be right back. And I'm like, mama, you know what I mean? Like, it is this, like, you think you're past so much, but we are just walking children. There's a really beautiful Flannery O'Connor quote that I would butcher, so I'm not going to try to quote it. But she basically says that anybody who survived childhood could write. She's like, if you took all that in and you're still here, then you are a writer. Like, I don't need to have a conversation with you about it. You just are a writer. And so I think, yeah.
I'm sorry. It makes me think when people talk, the term generational trauma comes up a lot.
Yeah.
And if we are talking about writing or being in a state of 5 years old, or always sort of referring back to that moment when we're young, when Auntie said, hit them first, don't get hit. Is that, are you writing about generational trauma? And does that relive itself over and over and over again? Or are we moving through it as we write it?
Yeah. Well, I think it's a complicated question. It's one I've come back to a lot because there are a lot of conversations we're having as a community, especially as a Black artists, Black writers, Black performers, like, what's gratuitous and what's not. And I always say, like, look, I'm in it to tell the truth, and I'm in it to ask the questions that I need to ask, right? You write the things you wish somebody would have written for you. That's what it is. But I always say, like, look, what happened in the bluest eye? What did Toni Morrison do? And Toni Morrison always said, like, in her work is a testament to this. You have to tell the truth, but you have to tell the truth with love. And I think that, like, when you put those things on stage, those things that are generational, that are societal, that, like, are these sort of traumas that become circles, that become loops that get passed down, like, they're no one's fault, but they are America. You know what I mean? And I'm not in it to make a fake America. So it's like, how do we tell a story that tells it like it is, but also does it in a hug, does it in a way that says, this is tough, but also I get it and I got you. I feel like that's all there is. Because once you do that, I think, like, especially the Black audience member is like, okay, I'm good. We can roll. I mean, that hurt, but I forgive you. Like, that's the goal, I think. That's what you're reaching for.
Toni Morrison is the queen of that. She says we cannot always hone on the crisis. Mm-hmm. At some point, there has to be the love, right? And I think that's what. Did you want to say something, Jeremy?
Yeah, I just wanted to add on to. Well, first, I want to thank you, CA, for saying the thing about Kanisha and the, like, I don't know the answer thing, because, like, that is a common thing. There's a great moment in Zola. I just rewatched it last night, where where Zola says, someone's like, why weren't you looking out for her? And Zola says, like, well, who's looking out for me? Which I just, like, love that line, because I think Black women don't get to ask that very often. But to the point of, like, what as communities, oppressed communities, how we engage with our traumas with love, and our traumas with care. I'm thinking a lot about how limited I think our expressions of grief, anger, and processing our own traumas are by our own communities now. And it hasn't just been now; it's forever. It's like, you look at the 1920s, the way in which Black people, queer people talked about what things we were allowed to talk about in public. The conversation recreates itself every 5 years, right? Mm-hmm. No one heard anything. The same book that everyone hated 30 years ago because it was so messed up, like The Bluest Eye, right? Like Sula, like now is like, de rigueur, and everyone's like, we love it, it's the thing. But most of our aunties and uncles and grandmas and grandcousins were not feeling it when it came out.
Yeah.
And this is for me being like standing on a hill to die for them, which is not a show which is a show I haven't seen. But, like, I'm watching a lot of the discourse around them, and a lot of people being like, I am overseeing X, Y, or Z. And I'm like, but these are collective, there are so many collective nightmares that we as Black people, we as queer people, like women in the room, like, so many oppressed people have had to deal with, and only 5 of us have told the story of how that's affected us as an individual. And I feel so bad for all of these other people who come in the wake of work like Slave Play, or in the wake of work like Get Out, who, like, are still trying to process their own personal relationship to the horrors of living in a society that tells us if you're not white, male, or straight, you don't deserve to breathe the same air, or breathe the same way. That, like, those people can't process their trauma because there are people on the internet who are like, well, or people in the community who are like, well, someone's already asked that question and they did it right. Don't ever ask it again. We now feel like we've done it wrong. And I wonder where our grace is around the fact that only 5 of us have been able to tell stories up to this point. Like, literally, I was talking about this the other day. There are only 2 other Black men who are alive right now who have written plays that have gone to Broadway in the last 40 years.
Who are those 2?
Terrell McCraney and George C. Wolfe. Those are the only 2 that are still alive.
There is so much. I just want to. You're saying so much, and I want to get to every one of those points.
Yes, I talk too much, so please.
No, I don't want to lose the point. The points are so heavy, and we could talk for hours. And we will have another half an hour of this. Atu, I wanted to get to you because I have never been moved the way you moved me on that stage, before or after. Honestly, it was so stirring for me. It was the language, you know, as Toni Morrison says, we do language and you do it well, but it was also the body, the dexterity, what you did with it, how you stripped off, how you stripped things off. And it made me think on a couple of levels. One is that there's so much stuff on top of Black thought, Black love, Black voice, Black history, Black truth. And then to see you bare on stage, I'm wondering what it was like to be bare on stage, if it was important to be bare on stage, and if it had more than just the skin showing. What was that about, being so exposed on the stage?
Yeah, it was in hindsight really liberating. In the midst of it, very scary and challenging. I will say that, like, I feel like I've had the great fortune to be able to sort of, I don't know, there's some alignment that happens where a role finds me in a moment where I need to work through the thing that the role is asking me to work through. Mm-hmm. And Slave Play was sort of like the peak of that for me. This sort of moment of like, you know, this character is bare, right? But at the same time, I, as the actor, had to say, this character is bare, but is stepping into some moment of power as well, right? And so I feel like it was a stripping off, but also like a sort of like arming up at the same time, you know? In order to be that exposed, I felt like I had to say, like, there is power in exposing yourself. And you, as the actor, have to own the power you have, right? In order to expose yourself. And like, yeah, and I think that, you know, what Jeremy wrote was sort of unflinching, and and the way Robert was running the room, you did not have a moment to sort of think about what it was you were doing. You just had to do. And I think, CA, you brought up this really amazing point. It's like, it's about the body, right? And I've gotten to this point where I'm like, yes, the mind is going to tell me all sorts of things, but if I put my body up there and lead with this is what this thing that I have, this instrument that I have, the rest of it's going to follow. Like, if I lead with the power that is my body, then I think that is the strongest tool I have for communication. And
it's interesting that you talk about the power, because, you know, the Black body has been weaponized. When we see a Black body, we get anxious. All of us, Black folks, white folks, anyone, we feel something visceral. And as a mother, there was a scene where you had very little on. At one point, I wanted to just cloak you. I wanted to protect you as a mama. But then I was like, it unfolded, and there was this power that you talk about that came forth. And when I say I've not been moved by a character, I mean, you really claimed that space. Before we go on to something else, I want to this was a personal question I have. There's a moment in the play where there's a scene that I'd like you to get into. And many of us on this call have not seen the play, so we don't have to detail it, but the backstory is oftentimes in interracial relationships, the Black person or the of color person or the indigenous person is seen to sort of level up when they date a white person and increase their status when just by tangentially being with a white person. And Slave Play sort of flipped that whole myth. Can you just walk us through the motherfucker, I'm the prize scene? I need that.
I mean, like this is.
I know. Because everyone was like, yes.
Also, I have to say that, like, that scene specifically, what a gift to have to like then launch into this year of pandemic. This year where like you don't have the things that you sort of draw your power from, right? Something to come, but like, I think I said this when we did the talk, on a blackout night. I said, I felt like that line specifically was a spell I was casting on myself. It just felt like something it felt like an incantation that I kept having to be like, even on the days I didn't believe it, I had to like get behind it in a way, right? And so I feel like, that, I guess, what's happening in that moment is Gary is coming into his fullest power. He is really saying, he is like, wait, he's having this epiphany in the moment. I have let you lead me around like you are leveling me up. And like, I feel like as Black and queer people, that is such a reality for us, right? We actually are the culture makers. We actually are shaping all of this, right? We are actually shaping all of these things. And then we're told by white folks that we cannot have access, or by whoever is in power that we cannot have access. It's like, we made it. We've been making it, and we will continue to make it.
I mean, yeah, that was
Yes,
poignant. Shalia, I'm with you now. I'm all into you. And I didn't want to have you wait this long.
No, the conversation's good.
The conversation was so good. Who's I gonna go? Who's I gonna cut off? But so you play a queer therapist in Slave Play. Your character got under my skin.
Mm-hmm.
She used, watching your character, I realized how much we have to be obsessed with study white culture, the language, intonation, the all the symbols, right, to validate us. What was it like in when you were playing that role? Was it weighing on you? Could you distance yourself from it? Because I know we do that a lot as Black folks. We have to study someone else's culture. We have to be obsessed with the other person's culture, with the white culture. It's tiring. I'm wondering how that role affected you on a personal level.
Yes, well, first, thank you everyone for having me. Yeah, that's actually something, as we were doing the show downtown, that both myself and Irene Sofia Lucio also brought up as we were like holding this very particular space, which are the folks who are holding up like the idea of the intellectual academic who is getting at the atrocities of racism. And what I found the most, or to be the most vulnerable, was the fact that these are tactics that I've had to use.
Mm-hmm.
And to actually like step on a stage and know that there are people who are going to see me who are going to realize like, no, I wasn't smiling at you because I was happy. I was smiling at you because I would get to my degree. I was hoping that I would get through to the end of the day at work. And sorry, folks, you're going to move with me as I get my battery. I was like, it's just real. I was like, I can sit here and pretend.
In the world of Zoom, mamas call on FaceTime, we get interrupted. Batteries die.
Well, and just the thing that was really shaking and was hitting me, and I'd even told some of my other cast members this, was just how much it hurt to smile that hard when you were already doing it to on the subway ride to make sure you walked into the theater safely, and just to and I know all of us, especially like Black cast members, we would talk about what that feeling was to like leave a theater, to bear all of that, to then watch folks have a visceral, emotional, like deeply connected experience of your work, and then a block away have something slapped right in your face that like, no, you're still Black. It doesn't matter where you are, when, which we know, but to be reminded and showing that I think, the sad thing is like a lot of people know the cut that's there, but we don't always get the opportunity, which we did in Slave Play, to show how much work is being held up to be able to hold so much.
Ooh, yeah.
Like that it's not just that we're, getting by and we've got sadness in our face. It's like, no, we have such a strength that we do it and continue to smile. Like that, Maya Angelou, like, I laughed so hard till I cried, and just tears streaming down with like your laugh lines showing. Like that to me was actually, for my particular role, the most vulnerable, to know that folks were actually going to see my most necessary and needed tactic to survive, particularly. The most ready of education of whatever. But also empowering, because also great to just like remove that mask and say, no, actually, there's crumbling going on. Just so you know this is work.
It's real work. There's a really beautiful documentary that many of you may have seen. It's called Black Art in the Absence of Light. Right?
Yes.
And it talks about how we have been creating art when no one's been looking, when no one's cared, in the absence of this light, of this gaze of white folks. And yet and still we have been coaxing out of nothing, beautiful things, important things. Shalia, tell me what you think slave play brought to light. What is it that it is delivering? Because if we don't define it, I don't want people to miss it. I want you to tell me what you think it brought to the audience, to the Black audience in particular.
Well, I mean, I feel like it's a few things. I, particularly for, you know, Black audience members, because there were, you know, a wide range of experiences afterwards, of feeling uplifted or feeling broken afterwards, all of that, and sometimes both of them happening at the same time. And this, even with, you know, family members and dear friends of mine who came to see it, what I gained most, what I saw from other people, is that we have to reinvestigate how can we bring our closed conversations forward with each other. That like we're gonna keep hurting if we keep saying that can only be said behind that door. And yes, we need the space to feel safe with each other first. Why like nights like Blackout were so important. But that
and that was when all Black audience, when you had an all Black audience,
yes, you know, because that is a different experience. But that even for each other, that there are parts of ourselves, you know, we're talking about, you know, whether it's being queer of any kind, trans folks, how we still put so many exclusions within our own community and want to, we still have an idea that to me is, let me not speak for everybody, but there are some people who have an idea is what is us doing our best that is deeply rooted in white supremacy and colonized points of view, so that we cannot be idiosyncratic human beings with one another, and actually hold space through that. So I know Black communities got that, whether that was through you know, a positive experience, or again, even if it caused arguments, but to know that like, oh right, there, we are not at a place of unconditional love for each other. So know that, you know, and the oneness, are we really talking about all of us? And it's the same in theater. So, and that, you know, we say that we're getting on stage to depict the truth of humanity, hopefully ask some questions about it. But how are we going to do that if we aren't seeing all of humanity, which is everyone who's here right now, everyone who was before, now, and every possibility of who's going to come? That's humanity. So we can't sit there and say that if we keep thinking that there are folks who have to be excluded out of some level of appropriateness, and also to what everyone's brought up already, the need for more space is because, one play, one role isn't going to hold everybody. We need to see each other and be able to go to the play that maybe feels like a stake in the heart to one person, but feels like the most glorious person of the next. And then in the next room, like we feel like we're getting hugged, and we need all of that happening at the same time to see all of our views. And if there's only 5 people doing it, it does feel, that there needs to be a fight for the room, you know, because we decided it's too small. But
I want to well, speaking of white supremacy.
Yes, that
Of white supremacy. I read a great quote, and it said, Shalia, you made me think about this quote: "The future does not belong to white supremacy and bias. It belongs to multiracial democracy." Alfonso, Jeremy, the whole crew, talk to me about how you see the future, whether it's on the stage, whether it's in politics. Give us some beauty, some vision of the future. It might not be beautiful, I don't know, but give us, what does the future look like to you? Alfonso?
For me, the future is a multiracial democracy. For me, the future is a manifestation of my dreams. For me, the future is liberation. I don't see liberation as something that is attainable, and I see it as elusive unless we think of it through an intersectional lens. And one of the challenges we face as a community and as a culture is that we have created hierarchies of identity. We have either acquiesced or actively participated in these hierarchies of identity. And in so doing, we ignore the plight of those that are sitting right next to us. The fact that 44 transgender and gender nonconforming people were killed in this country last year, and is not on the front pages of every single newspaper, tells us that we acquiesce in this hierarchy of identity. So for me, as I think about the future, the manifestation of this dream that I'm trying to manifest, I see liberation, but I see it through sort of a prism, a matrix that is diverse, intersectional, and dynamic.
Jeremy?
Well, I mean, I think that what I love about the future is its vastness and the unknowingness of it, right? I mean, I think one of the things that I'm really interested in, I've been watching a lot of anime during quarantine because it's like this love of mine that I had. Yeah.
You and my 15-year-old son.
Yeah. But this thing that I loved so much growing up, I had denied myself in my years of study, mainly because I just didn't have time, right? And so this year of rest gave me a chance to refill my well with these stories. And something I'm really obsessed with in specifically Japanese culture is this constant revisit, even in media that's for the very young, right? For the adolescent to young adult, there is a real wrestling with the scars of the past and what those things mean. You see a show like Attack on Titan, you see a show like Black Clover, and you know they're actively dealing with what it means to like be a country that has like performed genocide and has had genocide almost performed on them, right? And like how they try to fix that through these stories they're telling over and over and over to their children. Mm-hmm. And I don't know that their world is any better now because they've been telling these stories, but I know that they're more conscious of their behaviors now. And I hope that in America specifically, and in the West largely, we can start to have a real honest conversation about the violence and disruption that colonialism has wrought on our world. Colonialism is at the heart of every bit of misogyny, heteropatriarchy, and white supremacy in the West, right? You can trace so many things back to those early moments. There were indigenous colonies here that were completely engaged in like matriarchies before the introduction of Judeo-Christian ideals and like the utter genocide that happened here. Same within Africa, and same in many places and pockets of Europe. And I wonder what will happen if we get into a culture that starts to not run away from the fact of our history and starts leaning more into it. So I hope that our future is more engaged with our past and not passively engaged, but actively engaged.
When you talk about youth culture and perhaps that culture unearthing issues, scars that you said, can we just talk for a minute about Lil Nas X and the video? You know, just to kind of flip it, because it's not really my world. I have 5 young children in my house, so of course I've seen it at this point, and my kid, like everyone in my house, loves it. You know, talk to me. What are your thoughts on Lil Nas X?
I could not be more here for it. I could not be more here for it. Really, also, it's like for me, it's running really parallel to me to this show on HBO called Generation that I'm really living for as well. It's like it's about young people now saying, I don't apologize for anything that I am. And I love, I have teenage nephews and nieces, and like the thing I love about being in proximity to them is like it is feeding my liberation as well. And I think there's something about being an older person that you're just like, oh no. See, like I've got it figured out. But actually, I really love this ability to be like, no, you are fully in your liberation, and that gives me permission, even at this point in my life, to say, no, I have further to go inside of my liberation, right? And so I think there's something really, really beautiful about that. Lil Nas X is not apologizing for being himself. And there were moments because of the time I grew up, right? Where we were in the conversation, and that I felt I had to apologize, right? Mm-hmm. And this is giving me the opportunity to be like, no, today, as of today, there is no more apology.
But here's the issue, because
it's the number 1 record in America, like no apology.
And it gets complicated or not when we think about the audience of our art or our work being primarily white. Often the financiers of our work and our art being oftentimes white money, white critics, white audience. How do we stay true to the facts? How do we push the envelope forward? How do we not get into like fake history? I mean, I think Bridgerton is something that makes me kind of question, like, wait, are we softening the blow because some people need to be pleasantly, appeased through art? How do we keep our art authentic when we know that the money, the critics, and the eyes are white?
I mean, I'd love to hear everyone talk about this, but I feel as though
CA is shaking her head. No.
All I was gonna say was that, it's like I'm one of the Black people who did like Bridgerton, mainly because of how ridiculous so many parts of it were. I also like feeling like I was watching like my aunties like hang out and like talk about their romance novels. That like I felt like I saw in Bridgerton the world that my Aunt Kim is seeing when she's reading books that she gets at the grocery store, where no one on the cover looks like her, but someone in her imagination does, right? Or at least like the man who's supposed to be the man looks like Renee and not like Fabio. And so I like that type of
the ending.
What? Yeah, I like that ending. And moreover, what I like too is the fact that nothing will be authentic to all people. There are Black shows that are on television that I will go on Twitter, and every Black person that I follow is like, this is the Blackest shit ever. This spoke to me, blah, blah. And I'm like, that did? I mean, authentic is bad cinematography to me, but okay, go on. Like whatever it is. And I think that the only thing we can ask Black people and Black artists to do in the wake of the entangled space that all of our work is coming from, right? Because again, let's say all of our work is being paid for by Black people. They're going to be Black billionaires then. And I'm sorry, I grew up poor and Black. I have nothing in common with a Black billionaire outside of Blackness, right? So I think that I can only make work that's authentic to Jeremy and hope that other people find it authentic to them as well. And if they don't, then I guess I have to keep trying.
Or not, right? Or not. Also, there's again that I don't know. It's one of the things I deeply admire about you, Jeremy. There is you know what you are doing and what you are after, and that gives so much permission. There's so much permission given in that,
Yeah.
And
Go
I was
ahead.
gonna say too, this bit with what Atu and Jeremy both brought up, like Atu, like talking about your nieces and nephews, but you know, if we like give ourselves just a second to actually meet each other where we are and assume that there's going to be change, evolution, nuance that we've never seen before. Like so like during the pandemic, like I've gotten to get back to other parts of my artistry that aren't based solely in this industry, or when you know, when the light's on, and whether it's like getting back to painting and writing and all sorts of things that I've always had in me, but it's like, oh, there was a moment where you had to choose one and get real good at it, or you weren't going to get anywhere. But that, like, if we don't actually, each of us as individual artists, especially Black artists, show our full humanity to what we know in the moment, like it's, you know, it's not going to be seen. No one's going to ask for us to do that. So to sit there and even try and make the most authentic thing outside of ourselves, or to anyone else's label or critique, actually doesn't help anyone for us to get into the same exact mindset. Like if we can actually get to a place where all of us know that each human being is going to have their own individual experience, and we're so desperately counting on each other to show their individual experience, because we're only going to have this one. Yeah. Like there will be answers I won't have for this life, and I will need someone else to show me how they did that. Like it's like
it is a need for all. So
yes.
we have well, can I ask a question? Can we go 5 minutes over, people? Are you okay to keep going? Jeremy, do you have some place to be?
Someone is coming to my house, so I'm gonna go and open my door for them.
I had a feeling.
I can come back for as long as I can stay for another hour, as long as they can just get into the apartment. So
all right, so I want to keep this going for a few extra minutes. Go ahead, Jeremy. So here's what I've been thinking about. As a mother of a Black trans boy, I also date, my boyfriend is trans. I'm a Black woman. I know when we walk down the street, and I have 5 children, so we take up a lot of space when we walk down the street, and I can feel sometimes the discomfort in people just when we show up, being Black and trans and queer and robust. And I can imagine that as all of you are in the spotlight, you can feel the discomfort as well. And my question, and if each of you can give me the short answer, how do you stay focused? For me, it's in my eyes, where I place my eyes. But I'm curious to know, Atu and CA and Shalia and Alfonso, how do you stay focused when you know that there's discomfort, people watching you, that the folks watching are uncomfortable?
I mean, I'll start by just saying that I'm going to say it, that shit has become fuel. And it harkens back to something that Robert said, if you've come here expecting comfort, you may not have it. I will not give it to you. And like my life, my one precious life that I have is not about making anybody comfortable. It really is about living in my fullness. And if that makes you uncomfortable, that's your problem. So really, I think the way I stay focused is like taking all that discomfort in and just like moving forward. I mean, and there's something about it that feels like fuel to me at this point in my life. So yeah, that's how I move forward. I transmute it. That's how I move.
Transmute it. CA.
Yeah. Well, I was something I think about a lot these days because of a project that I'm working on, and it is like all we have are the people we choose. You know what I mean? Like the people we choose to love, the people we have no choice but to love. Like that is all there is. And if somebody on the outside of that love is trying to tell me what it is, then they've walked into the wrong room, is my thing. You know what I mean? Like I'm just like, you know, I think I've fought too hard to be a happy queer woman to have somebody tell me what it is. You know what I mean? And it is so much so that I find, you know, I live in Bed-Stuy. Bed-Stuy is a historically Black neighborhood that has been heavily gentrified in some specific ways. I consider myself one of those gentrifiers, and I'm Black, but I'm not from here. You know what I mean? And it is and I have a white partner, and we walk down the street, and there are eyes that we're gonna get. And I'm like, do you know how long I've been in this game? You really think your eyes and like a few lines are going to make me feel bad? Like, that's not how I roll anymore. And it shocks me how much I don't even hear it. Like, every once in a while, there's like a weird comment. And I'm probably like, did you hear that? And I'm like, no, I wasn't paying attention. Like, I've worked way too hard to be okay with myself and to be okay with the people who bring me joy, no matter how I find them, where I find them, what they look like. You know what I mean? That's hard personal work that I had to do inside my family, inside my house. Like, I'm not about to do it on the street with a bunch of strangers. Like, get that mess out of here.
Skin in the game.
Like, yeah, I can't. There are games that I can't play if I want to be a happy person. You know what I mean? And like, I'm saying that from, I will admit that comes from some privilege, right? Like, that's more easily said in a place where I feel safe, right? I might be saying this very differently if I were in some other part of the country. But where I am now, I don't got time for it. Now, if I was in another part of the country, I might be like, get in the car. But that's a different situation.
Alfonso, give me a take on this.
Let me do this quickly. I think I do one of three things. I lean into my self-identification, my being even more when that happens. I also arm up because I always have to feel that I'm in the position to protect myself. As a Black man in America, you have to be. And then finally, I try to find or identify their humanity. Because I think what we have to be mindful of is we don't become them. We don't become our oppressors.
Yeah.
And so I lean into my identity and at the same time find their humanity and protect myself through the process.
Arm up and ID humanity. Shalia, let me know.
Oh, and see, no, I feel like mine isn't as like kind as everybody or as open-hearted as I would want it to be. Was like, I grew up in Stockton, California, which was, you had to be aware where you are. And I found myself, especially in New York, but this was even in Connecticut, wherever, like just not always, but sometimes enjoying that process of what does it mean when someone looks at me in a way that they obviously don't want me there, and just let them, like, just in my face, let them know that, like, well, if you want to fight, it's going to be harder than you think. Like, this isn't going to be easy for you to, if you think you could easily tear me down, that's not this. Like, that's not going to be today. And even like the, when you would ask me about playing Taya, like letting them clearly see the mask fall. Like when you sit there, just know that was a choice for me to let you know that you had an out and you didn't take it. So this could go a lot of ways. But I guess that's the thing. How do you flip the power? How do you, in that moment, let them know that, like, this is actually not on your decision. I also have a stake in this.
And the chats are going nuts from your answer. So we have, I'm gonna ask us to sit, if we can, 5 more minutes with this. There's something that, Jeremy, that I read about you, and you quote, I guess I can quote you. You said, I became rich in white culture. What did that mean then? And has that richness expanded since then? Because I think you were talking about when you were younger. Talk to me about owning the culture that is not yours and what that does for you and what that did for you as an artist. And then we're going to wrap it up.
Totally. I mean, I think that this is true of many people who were socialized in the 20th century and were not of the dominant class, right? In order to be able to navigate it quite well when you don't come from actual wealth, when you come from economic disparity, when you come from, as in a body that's of a person of color, that is a male person of color, which is specific in the South, right? And that if you come in a queer body as well, and a femme adjacent presenting body, you have to arm yourself with some currency that the mainstream or the status quo understands, and that was white supremacy and masculinity. And I could never be rich in masculinity. I was never going to be I was going to say a bad word. I was never going to be the queen that walked around and threw a football and ran faster than all of the straight boys in order to earn their respect and to like enter into that space of safety. I had to be someone who knew more about all the books that people said one needed to know about in the canon in order to have some semblance of safety, to be protected, right? Because if people think that someone in the room is rich in the culture they think is important, that they have something that they're some great miner of the dominant culture, they will protect you. And so being the person who knew more about Ernest Hemingway and Eugene O'Neill and Edward Albee than everyone else in the room got me protected by the teachers, by the institutions that otherwise discarded people that looked like me. And I think that in that essay that you're pointing to, that also was my way of navigating wanting to feel desirable in a country that tells you that you are not someone to desire, right? When that country that tells you you are not a prize. And so you can adorn yourself in like accessories of a prize all the time. And I think that work like Slave Play and the work that I put in the Golden Collection are all works that helped me get to a place of recognizing that I don't need adornment to be worthy. I just am. And that was that was sort of the journey of me and my work and what that quote meant then and what it means to me now. Thank you.
Thank you. So we started off the night, and I am going to close it out now, but we started off the night with Alfonso sort of setting the tone for us. I want to bring it back to you, Alfonso, for a moment. There is such a divide between establishment and people, right? The establishment and the people. Black folk, white folk, rich folk, poor folk, cisgender folk, transgender folk. Talk to me about how we can move forward with the polarities that exist, right? How can an organization like HRC, and I don't want to be kumbaya in this moment, but how can we move forward with these separations, with these distinct individual identities? How can the Human Rights Campaign and organizations like that assist in joining together the movements so that we are bridging and not necessarily dividing and dividing and dividing?
You know, I said this 2 years ago when I gave a speech when I first joined the Human Rights Campaign, and the title of the speech was "See Beyond Yourself." We are living in fractured, polarized times where people are unable to see the humanity of the person sitting next to them. And it is not a new problem. We've been confronting this challenge for decades. Black people in this country, LGBTQ people, brown people, goes down the list. And I think what we at the Human Rights Campaign can do and other organizations can do is to try to bridge that divide and to get people to be comfortable having the uncomfortable conversations. We all bring implicit bias to the table. But unfortunately, as people of color, we're usually the brunt of the implicit biases that we see. So can we get everyone to get to the point where we raise the level of consciousness? And can we shift from the politics of the self to the politics of the community? Can we just agree to do just that? To not only fight for policies that we care about that will benefit our folk, but instead policies that will benefit our community. And if we can shift that paradigm, if we can get us all to just shift, and I'm speaking to those who are generally in positions of power, to shift their thinking so that they're thinking about policies that are going to benefit the person who you don't know, who don't look like you, then maybe we can create that space that is reflected in our Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Maybe we can actually live in a democracy that benefits all of us, because we know as people of color that the construct that exists now does not operate fairly and equitably. So that's really what I think the Human Rights Campaign can do, what other organizations should do, what individuals can do, is see beyond yourself and figure out a way for us to have the uncomfortable conversations to fully realize the democracy that we want.
with those words, I want to say thank you, panelists. Thank you, Slave Play. Thank you, the Human Rights Campaign. This was such an important conversation. We could go on for another hour. I'm going to invite all of you over to my house for dinner. I'm cooking. We're going to continue to chop it up. But I want us to continue to transform, continue to support the fight. If you have it in you, please check out the Human Rights Campaign, see what we do. As the chair of the foundation board, I know the work that we're doing for the trans community, which is really important to me. I see the work that these artists are doing on the stage. Let's just continue to support each other. Have a great night, and I love you. Oh, wait a minute, Jeremy.
Yeah, no, and I was just gonna say, if there's any way as well, speaking of support, that you all can check out the Golden Collection, which you can buy specifically from Books and Crannies, a Black female-owned bookstore in my hometown in Virginia, Martinsville, Virginia. All proceeds from full collections that are bought there go back. Some of them go back to the HRC. So you're doing a full support. Also, you can just, if you don't want to have 18 plays in your home, you can donate them to your local library. So yeah, like thank you so much for having us, and I hope you all have a blessed night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Okay.
Take care, everybody.